Sea to shining sea. She was quiet in the back of the car, not rudely or ungratefully. It would almost be easier if she was, her father thought. It was like the issue was already decided inside her. A 12-year-old girl, he thought. Who would have thought that a 12-year-old girl could sit quietly in a way that would get inside him like that? It was true that she was his own daughter, but love was supposed to stay in a box marked father and daughter. It wasn't supposed to knock him down like this. He kept his eyes on the road as he drove. It was love that made him not give up, though. He did not give up in his belief that she would come around to the land. He and Lizzie were the two appreciators of beauty in the family. From the time she was little, they could look out the window at snow falling for longer than felt comfortable for Kate. He had faith. He had faith in all those times of looking at the snow together, in the way she would ask to go to a park just to see a certain tree, in the way she would write poems that were pages long in school. She would see the land. She would see the land the way he did. Secretly, it had been one of the main reasons for the trip, a chance for he and Lizzie to look out the window together at length, even if she was sitting in the back with her brother. Toby was more like his mother, bouncing off of everything left and right, but he and Lizzie could appreciate the beauty that came over time with something vast and slow. He had something for her, he thought, the California coast. They were only a few hours away now. He felt sure that something would happen to her like what had happened to him when he had first seen it, even though that had been in college. The particular arrangement of ocean and rock and trees. She would understand why they had driven all the way out from Kansas City, why it was important that they reach the ocean. She had already seen the Atlantic on the other side, but seeing the Pacific would help her understand who she was. From sea to shining sea. It was really true. He did not think she would say what she had said in the Rockies and among the arches in Utah. The coast would be too much. The whole country was hers, he wanted to tell her, in the same way that it had been his when he had driven across it when he was young. But he was more excited about its chance to be hers. He was more excited than he had been for himself. She would know when she saw it. He felt sure of it. She would see it in the afternoon light, too, it seemed. The sun hitting the water at the end of the land. She would see the way in which they were American when she saw it. He hadn't planned the trip thinking that he wanted to give his kids a feeling of America, but it had become more important to him as they drove west. He hadn't known how much he had inside him. He hadn't known how much he would feel something that wasn't so much a rah-rah patriotism, but a sort of quiet and personal kind. The California coast, that would do it, he thought. She wouldn't be able to keep up this thing she was on. He remembered how in his youth his friends had been excited for LA and the beach and girls, but he had been most glad about the part of the coast where there was no beach, just those cliff walls that went straight down, and an occasional lonely cypress tree standing at the edge. As a young man, he couldn't say that he liked that more than the beach, but now he could admit it wildly, partly because he had Lizzie to admit things wildly with. Only she didn't think it was wild. She thought it was normal. It was normal to admit you liked an empty, lonely part of the coast more than the beach, because if she felt something, it was true. He owed her something for that, and he knew he owed her something for the dreamy feeling of America he'd gotten now near the end of it. But that didn't mean he should look past this thing she had going since they'd started the drive. She could join in with him in the feeling, the way she would join in with him over snow. Didn't she know those songs from school? He felt sure they'd learned them there. Anyway, it wasn't the rah-rah stuff he was talking about. He didn't want to be one of those families that tried to out red, white, and blue everybody on the block on the 4th of July. It was an appreciation for the size and the scope. It was the sense that something connected the diner they'd stopped at in Sacramento to everything back home in Missouri, and to all that empty land in Nevada, and to all the places he hoped she would go to in her life, Chicago and New York, and places he never thought about much, like Seattle. They were all America, and they were all hers. He was excited for all the ways they would become hers. He wanted her to be able to look back sometime later when she was a young woman in Chicago or New York or Seattle and say that she learned something about America when her father took the family on a road trip to California when she was 12. She was going to need it. It would be something solid under her feet. To know that for all the ways the country changed throughout its expanse, she was American through all of it. She was going to need it to know that the bigness of the country could be represented in the size of her own dreams. That was something he wanted them to know, that this was how big it was possible to dream in America. There was a reason it had taken them 8 days and nights to travel across the land. It was because the size of the hearts of the people, it was because of the size of the hearts of the people who had come before them. They could have stopped at so many places along the way, but then they wouldn't have reached the end, to the same coast that had opened him up to the size of his own dreams when he was young. She would know it when she saw it. It was understandable that she wouldn't have a sense of it back home in Kansas City, where there was no ocean to measure this kind of thing by. And he began to get very excited for the sight of the ocean, for the chance to present to Lizzie and Toby the Pacific Ocean. The whole thing. It had to go from the Atlantic to the Pacific. What were they supposed to do? Were they supposed to not want to see how far a thing went? Nobody did that. It was human to see how far. It was as natural as when they tried to see how fast they could run or how far they could throw a ball. You had to go to the edge. The Pacific Ocean was their edge. It was theirs all the way from Kansas City. They would know when they saw it that it was theirs and that it had been waiting for them all this time. They came up over one last hill. He knew they were close because he could smell the sea. It was even better than he thought. They came to the top of the hill and they all looked out at the sea in silence. He felt too happy to be proud. The happiness spread past him to his past and to his future, to his family in the car, to his country, and to life. He looked at Lizzie in the rearview mirror. "What do you think?" he said. "It's beautiful," she said, "but I still wish it was Indian land."